Okay, so you know how this works by now, right? You send us the stuff you're reading, and we dive deep.
That's right, a deep dive into your sources.
And for this deep dive, we're looking at excerpts that you sent from Sunrise on the Reaping, a Hunger Games novel by Suzanne Collins.
It's interesting because we're deliberately going into this without the benefit of hindsight.
Like, we don't know where the story goes from here.
Exactly. So we're looking at the how and the why of what's right here in front of us.
The foundation.
The building blocks, the dynamics at play in these really early moments with the characters.
Yeah, like, how do things start? And why do they start that way? And what does that tell us without knowing anything else about what's going to happen?
And these excerpts are all about a character we know pretty well already, Hamish Abernathy.
So we're basically getting a glimpse into his world before, well, everything we know about him.
His origin story, in a way, before the games, before he becomes the mentor we see in the later books.
Yeah, exactly. So we get to really see how things begin for him and what that might tell us about who he is and the choices he makes.
So let's jump right in with Hamish's 16th birthday in District 12.
Okay, so we're in District 12. It's Hamish's 16th birthday, and they're having cornbread, which seems to be like a real treat.
Right, even a small detail like that, the cornbread being a step up from the usual capital flour, tells us a lot.
It's like, even within the poverty of District 12, there are these subtle but important distinctions.
A hierarchy of hardship.
Yeah, exactly. Like, some people are even worse off than others.
That's
And even a little bit of cornbread feels like a luxury.
And then there's that interaction with Hattie the Stiller, and she gives him that pint of white liquor.
It's a birthday present, but it's clearly more than just a drink, right?
Right. It's a personal indulgence, sure, but it's also something he could barter or trade if he needed to.
Because in that kind of environment, everything has value.
Exactly. And what she says to him is really interesting. If you're old enough to make it, you're old enough to drink it.
That's kind of a rough definition of adulthood in District 12, isn't it?
Yeah, it really highlights the harsh reality of their lives and how these kids have to grow up so fast.
And then almost immediately, we get this darker side to the story, the mention of Hamish's family history with the rebellion.
Right, those lingering questions about his father's death. Was it an accident or something more deliberate, something orchestrated by the Capitol?
And how people like Clerk Carmine are still suspicious of them all these years later.
It shows how deeply the Capitol's influence permeates everything, even personal family histories.
Like they can't escape the past.
Exactly. It's this idea of inherited suspicion, inherited rebellion, even.
Yeah, like even if Hamish hasn't done anything directly rebellious himself, he's already under suspicion because of his family.
And that speaks to the Capitol's control,
Yeah.
their need to maintain order and squash any potential for dissent.
Right from the very beginning.
And then we have this strange encounter in the woods with Burdock and the mockingjays.
Yeah, it's almost surreal these birds that we know become such important symbols. Later on, they're singing for Burdock.
Pretty impressive stuff, as it says in the excerpt.
And then suddenly, this girl appears out of nowhere, dropping down from a tree.
Demanding to know who's bothering her birds.
It's such a brief moment, but it feels so significant.
Right. It hints at the interconnectedness of this world, the potential for unexpected alliances or conflicts.
And that girl, her possessiveness over the mockingjays, makes you wonder what her story is.
Yeah, it definitely feels like foreshadowing, like she's going to play a bigger role somehow.
And then amidst all this, we also see Hamish's connection with Lenore Dove.
The kisses, the way he immediately thinks of giving the white liquor to her uncle to gain favor.
It shows a different side to him, doesn't it?
Right, it suggests a genuine affection for Lenore Dove, but also a pragmatism, a need to navigate these complex social dynamics.
Because relationships are important for survival, too.
Absolutely, especially in a place like District 12 where resources are scarce and alliances are essential.
So let's talk about that birthday conversation between Hamish and Lenore Dove about the reaping.
Okay, so they're talking about the reaping, and what strikes you about this conversation?
Well, Lenore Dove, she really challenges this idea that the reaping is just an unavoidable fact of life.
That it's just inevitable, something that has to happen every year.
And she connects it to Hamish's birthday, which is interesting.
Yeah, she's basically saying that just because the reaping falls on his birthday every year doesn't mean it's some kind of unchangeable law of nature.
And what's her argument for that? What evidence does she use?
She points out that the reaping is actually a relatively recent invention.
Like it hasn't always been this way.
Right, only for the past 50 years, so it's not some ancient tradition or anything.
So she's saying if it was created, it could be dismantled.
Exactly, and that's a really powerful idea, especially in the context of Panem, where the capital's control seems so absolute.
Like she's questioning the very foundation of their power.
And notice how Hamish reacts to this? He's resistant at first.
He's grown up with the reaping as this constant threat. It's just part of his reality.
It's hard for him to even imagine a world without it.
He says something like, I can't really imagine the sun not rising tomorrow.
And Lenore Dove, she counters with, can you imagine it rising on a world without a reaping?
That's such a striking image.
Right, she's trying to shift his perspective to make him see that even something as seemingly permanent as the reaping could be changed.
And she doesn't give up. She keeps pushing him to see this possibility.
And there's that interesting detail that Lenore Dove is sometimes too smart for Haymitch.
Yeah, it suggests a difference in their thinking.
Like she's more willing to challenge the status quo, to think outside the box.
To imagine a different future.
So let's move on to another object that plays a significant role in the story, the C-shaped necklace Lenore Dove gives to Haymitch.
Okay, so she gives him this necklace, and she describes it as pretty with a purpose.
What do you think she means by that?
Well, it's obviously not just a simple piece of jewelry.
It has to have some other
And
function.
it turns out that it's a flint striker.
That smooth steel edge isn't just decorative, it's a tool.
And we know from earlier that Haymitch learned to start fires with his family's old striker.
So this new one is a practical gift, but it also symbolizes something more.
Resourcefulness, self-reliance. Those are essential qualities in District 12.
It's a very different kind of gift than what you might find in the capital.
And then suddenly everything changes with the arrival of Plutarch and Drusilla.
It's such an abrupt shift in tone, isn't it?
Yeah, they just barge in and immediately assert their authority.
And Drusilla's threat to Haymitch and Lenore Dove, play this right or I'll shoot you myself.
It's chilling. It shows how casually they resort to violence.
And Plutarch, he's immediately focused on getting dramatic footage.
He even mentions the no peacekeeper, no peace angle he wants to capture.
It's a clear example of how the Capitol manipulates the narrative. They're already creating propaganda.
And then the tension leading up to the reaping draw, it's palpable.
Haymitch having to steady himself physically, it's like he already senses what's coming.
And then the announcement of Wyatt Callow as the first tribute, it's a turning point.
Life as they know it is over.
And the aftermath of the reaping is just brutal, the way the peacekeepers handle the families.
No time for goodbyes, no compassion, just brute force.
Mr. Donner being dragged away, losing his money. Luella's terror when they put the handcuffs on her.
It's heartbreaking to see their helplessness.
And then Plutarch tries to exploit the situation with Haymitch's mother and Sid.
Offering them a brief moment with Haymitch in exchange for a usable reaction shot.
It's just sickening how he tries to manipulate their grief.
And Haymitch, he understands what's happening. He pleads with his mother not to give in.
Don't do it, Ma.
He knows that Plutarch is just using them.
And his final moments with his mother and Sid are so poignant, giving them his few possessions.
The money, the peanuts, his knife, even the gumdrops he was going to give to Lenore Dove.
It's like he's saying goodbye to his old life.
And his words to Sid telling him to be brave, to be the man of the house now.
It's such a heavy burden for a young boy.
And when Haymitch resists, they use those electric prods on him.
It's a stark reminder of the power imbalance, the utter futility of fighting back.
The journey to the Capitol is described in these stark, unromanticized terms.
Confined in the transport, seeing the grim reality outside.
It's a deliberate contrast to the opulence and extravagance we know awaits them in the Capitol.
And Haymitch's reflection on Woodbine's death.
He almost sees it as a preferable alternative to what he's facing.
Yeah, it's a really dark thought.
But it speaks to the despair and fear he's feeling.
And in their arrival in the Capitol, Plutarch's casual remark about giving the District 12 segment the old Heavensby spin.
And Drusilla's vanity worrying about how old she looks.
It's also superficial, so out of touch with the gravity of the situation.
And it's revealing how casually they talk about manipulating the narrative.
Like it's just a game to them.
And Luella and Wyatt, they understand what's happening. They know that Plutarch is stacking the deck.
It shows a certain level of cynicism, but also awareness.
They're not completely naive. They see the manipulation.
And Plutarch's justification for it is chilling, that it's necessary to sell the tributes to sponsors.
He's reducing these kids to commodities. Their lives are just entertainment.
And then the bizarre birthday celebration the Capitol throws for Haymitch.
The cake, the song, the intrusive cameraman.
It's all so grotesquely out of sync with what he's going through.
This is a performance designed to mask their cruelty with this veneer of forced celebration.
But even in that environment, we see those glimmers of connection, the whispered word between Haymitch and Lenore Dove.
Yeah, it's a small moment, but it speaks volumes about their bond.
And Maisie's interest in the C-shaped necklace.
It reveals a bit about District 12's culture, how Mr. Donner would give these necklaces to kids who did him favors.
It's a reminder that they have lives and relationships outside of the games.
And Luella's understanding of Wyatt's coin tricks as gambling.
It connects back to those earlier mentions of Mr. Callow and his gambling habits.
And it raises the disturbing possibility that Wyatt might have been betting on the reaping.
Like he was profiting from their misfortune.
It adds a layer of moral complexity to their situation.
And even the Capitol's propaganda banners, the way they twist their slogans to control their own citizens.
No peace, no prosperity, no Hunger Games, no peace.
It suggests that their control isn't absolute, that they need to constantly reinforce their ideology.
So what have we learned from this deep dive into Haymitch's early life?
Well, we've seen the stark contrast, the intimacy of personal relationships set against the backdrop of oppression.
The resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming power.
The constant manipulation of truth for political gain.
And through Haymitch's experiences, we've seen the beginnings of his transformation.
From a somewhat naive 16-year-old to the hardened, cynical mentor we know from the later books.
And by focusing on these early moments without knowing what's to come, we gain a deeper appreciation for the world building and the subtle ways Collins sets up the core themes of the story.
So as you continue reading Sunrise on the Reaping, keep these early observations in mind.
Pay attention to those moments of quiet defiance, like Lenore Dove's questioning of the reaping.
And think about what those small acts of resistance might mean in the bigger picture.
And look for the significance in the seemingly small details: a necklace, a shared glance. They often reveal deeper truths about this world.
Thank you for sharing these excerpts with us. It's been a fascinating deep dive into Haymitch's beginnings.
We hope this analysis has given you a richer understanding of the foundations of the story.
And as always, we encourage you to keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deeper into the stories you love.
We'll see you on our next deep dive.
Bye for now.